Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and welcome to the latest episode of the Hard Compound Live. For those of you who don't know, my name is Rich, and I run and operate the Hard Compound. We're a one-stop shop for all things motorsport. We cover everything from F1 to touring cars to IndyCar, NASCAR, rallying, World Superbikes, British Superbikes, World Superbikes, MotoGP. Anything you can shake a stick at, and we do that in the form of race reviews, race previews, articles, throwbacks on this day, all that kind of thing. And we try and keep our finger on the pulse of everything that's going on. And in case you hadn't noticed, we also do live interviews. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Our live streams, as this one is now, go out on our Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter feeds, and they're also automatically saved for you to go and have a look back later. If you go onto Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, just search for The Hard Compound, and you'll find us. So do give us a follow if you're not doing so already. Hit that notification bell over on Twitter as well. We've had a number of excellent guests, and we've got another one tonight. Just want to run through a few that we've had in the past. This is actually the 56th live chat that we've done, which is amazing. We've spoken to a number of riders from the two-wheeled world, the British Superbike Championship. We've spoken with six-time champion Shane Byrne. We've spoken with the likes of Christian Idden, with Ryan Vickers, Brad Jones, and Bjorn Esment. From the world of touring cars, we've spoken to some of the current British touring car crop, the likes of Mr. Michael Crease. We've spoken to Jade Edwards. We've spoken to Tom Chilton, Chris Smiley, Jake Hill, Ollie Jackson, Rick Parfitt Jr. We've also spoken to legends such as Steve Soper, Rob Gravitt, Matt Neal, Gabriele Tarquini, John Cleland, Rickard Rydell, Andy Prio. We've also spoken to Dick Bennett, the boss of West Surrey Racing, who is credited with launching the careers of Ayrton Senna, Mika Hakkinen, Rubens Barrichello, and the like. And from the world of F1 and IndyCar, we spoke with Mr. Terry Fullerton, the guy that Ayrton Senna called his greatest rival back in karting, which is fantastic. We've spoken with Derek Warwick, Stephanie Hansen, David Brabham, Alex Caffey, Perry McCarthy, Mark Blundell, Larry Lyndyke, Danny Sullivan, Willie T. Ribbs, Will Power, Alex Palou, Carlton, Brian Herter, and we've had the legend. We've also spoken, with Eddie Cheever, Mika Salo, Anthony Reid, and we've spoken with legends, like Jackie Ix and Mario Andretti. So lots of fantastic guests. Which we've been very lucky to have on the show. And we have another fantastic guest tonight. He is a Formula F1 racing driver. He is competed in the 24 Hours of Le Mans, the European Le Mans Series, various feeder series out in the East and in Europe. And he is now best known for his work on Sky Sports as a pundit and expert. So I'm going to stop rambling, and I'm going to bring him in because you've tuned in to listen to our guest and not me. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Mr. Karun Chandhok.
Hi, how are you doing? I feel a bit bad now because you've rattled off the entire list. It's like I'm like the bottom of the barrel, run out of people in motorsport.
Absolutely not. I actually wanted to contact you like a year or so ago, but I thought
I was only joking.
Come on, I thought he wouldn't come on. He works for Sky Sports. But thank you very, very much for coming and having a chat with us. Very, very much appreciated.
Pleasure. Always happy to chat with people like yourself, passionate about the sport, and this is what keeps our world ticking around, is passionate fans of the sport who love to talk about it. So yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, thank you. I think sounds like a polite way of saying I'm a nerd, which I absolutely am.
Well, I'm a nerd, so yeah, I'll take 100%.
Excellent. We're happy with that. Very happy. Let's get my notes. As I said, thank you very much.
Stand up a second. Are you in Team Kit? You're fully team. Wow, you're in super fan mode. Okay.
Well, yeah, I kind of have to wear this, obviously, with your current links to Williams. I've been a Williams fan for many years. I keep it neutral on the page, of course, but this man up here, I don't know if you can see, you got Mr. Nigel Mansell there. He's the man that got me into it all.
I know. I read your post on your website for
Adelaide
86.
Yeah, so I need to get the website back up and running, but it's
All right,
takes a lot of
crack
time.
on.
But
Sorry, I
yes,
keep interrupting you.
no, absolutely no problem at all. I said I'm based in Reading. You know, we're based in Reading, so William's just up the road in Didcot. So yeah, big fan. Just want to turn my attention quickly to the comment section. Hello, folks. For tuning in. Got a few comments coming in already. Thomas Day, Andre Den Elson from Belgium. Excellent. Carol Reed, Simon Steele, Thomas Day, John Kane, Oliver Taylor, Margaret Todd. Many people. Oh, Michael Crease, current British touring car driver. Good evening, Creasy. Thank you for tuning in. It says, tell him to get his backside in the BTCC next year.
It's something that's definitely on my mind. So it's a conversation to pick up in a few weeks. Definitely.
Oh, well, there you go. We would love to see that.
I'd love to. I mean, now that Plato's about to retire, that's one less person to biff you off the track. So he'll be a very expensive. He'll be a very expensive driver coach. I'll have to buy lots of gin, but.
Yes. No comment. But no, I mean, there's lots of people that would love to see you in the.
No, I think it'll be fun. It's one discipline of the sport that I haven't experienced, to be honest. You know, I've been lucky to drive all sorts of single seaters and sports cars and GTs and Formula E and pretty much every other form of motorsport apart from stuff in America. So yeah, no, I think it'd be nice to do a bit of touring car stuff sometime.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed. Watch this space, folks. Yeah, but thanks to everyone who's commented. Do put any questions in for Karun. We'll try and work them in. We've got quite a bit to get through, and we'll try and work them in. But if I may, Karun, if we what I'd like to do is start right back at the start. The very start. Obviously, you were born out in India, out in what was Madras, wasn't it? And it's now Chennai.
Correct.
How did it all start for you in motorsport? How did you become interested?
I grew up in a family that was into motorsport. My dad, my granddad, my grandmum used to race as well. So I grew up in a motorsport environment, but I wasn't. It's not like they forced us into it. My brother, for example, grew up in the same house in the same environment and had no interest in motorsport.
Right.
But I loved it. From a very young age, I absolutely loved it and read about. I just read and watched everything insatiably as I could, and just like most kids, dreamt of being a Formula One driver. Obviously, growing up in India, it felt like another world, and even today, I sometimes have to stop and check myself that I'm friends with people that I used to watch growing up. People like Damon and stuff like that. I used to watch him on the telly, and Jacques and those sort of people. And it's India is so far away, not just geographically, but from a sporting sense, from a motorsport sense. It's so far away from the center of the sport here in the UK or in Europe, I should say, that you just felt like you were on another planet. But it was a hard graft and lots of years of plugging away at it. And eventually I came to the UK on the 1st of February 2002 to race in Formula 3. Wow. So that was a big step. I raced 1 year in India in the national championship, did a year racing across Asia, won the Indian championship, won the Asian championship. So the next step was to come to Europe. And I never forget rocking up. My dad and I showed up, on a Lufthansa flight, sitting in row 56, landed at Heathrow in the deep, dark depths of winter, going, what on earth is going on?
What am I doing?
Yeah, you left 30 degrees of sunshine by the beach in Madras to come to Brackley in Northamptonshire. I've gone from a city of 11 million people to a town of 11,000
wow.
in the middle of winter. So that was interesting. But listen, but you're chasing the dream, right? And then to quote a Mark Webber phrase, you would charge through walls. And I think there's something about people like Mark coming from down under and the South Americans and people from the outside of Europe, because we have to sacrifice and give up a lot. You give up a comfy, cushy life in your home and come to a country where everything's different. The food, the language, the people, the culture, all of it's different, but you're chasing the dream. So that's in summary how I got here.
Wow. I mean, And as you say, I mean, I think we've mentioned it in some of the comments on the post when we announced that you were coming on. You know, I think a lot of people have said, you know, what was it like being interested in motorsport in India, which, as I think we know, not to stereotype, is mainly a cricket country.
Absolutely,
Huge.
yeah. I mean,
It's
if you
huge.
didn't,
And then,
yeah.
I mean, like football's taking off a bit, but motorsport, it's not known, is it? Did you feel like, did you ever feel like, how am I, not saying that you want to get out of there, but did you ever think, how am I going to get to where I need to be
Oh,
from where I
absolutely.
am?
Absolutely. I mean, every year it's a question of, okay, the journey is about to end because you've run out of money and opportunities, and you're done, and your career's over. And that was a constant worry. And small things that people in the UK or Europe don't appreciate, right? When I first came um, to the UK, the rupee to the pound was 52. Today it's 100. So when you
Wow.
have to go out and raise sponsorship, all of a sudden, in that first 3 years of racing in Formula 3, and trying to do, GP2 and a bit of World Series and stuff, the rupee lost 25% to the pound and the euro. And all of a sudden, your budget's just, which is already enormous, has suddenly gone up another
Just gone up
25%.
again.
And these are things that, only people from outside of the continent and the UK, I think, can appreciate. So, yeah, absolutely. There's huge insecurities on a month to month basis of whether you'd have, and it affects you, right? You go testing and you look around, and rivals like Nelson Piquet Jr. and Adam Carroll and all these great drivers I was up against, they had twice as many sets of tires, and twice as many days of testing and all the rest of it. So I'm
Sure.
not making excuses, but that's the reality of it. And at
How
some
it was,
stage
yeah.
at some stage you have to go, okay, this is, are you just pushing, what, uphill, and
Yes. Yeah.
you need to jack
Yeah.
it in. But listen, it's in many ways, I think it's such a mentally challenging sport, especially if you haven't got the financial backing, right? You
Yeah.
need such strong mental resilience to still go out there, get off your butt, go training, go to the gym, keep yourself fit in case the budget comes together, and motivate
Sure.
yourself. So it sets you up for life, I think, in many ways. Whatever life throws at you after that sort of struggle, I think, especially at a young age, you mature a lot. I was at the age of, I don't know, 20, 21. My classmates from school in India are all, off at uni, undergrad, and doing what people do at university, and
I never
consuming
did.
copious amounts of alcohol, whereas I'm trying to negotiate deals with sponsors for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and uh, just to keep my career
Wow.
going. So I think by the age of um, 24, I'd been in the sport for 8 years as a driver, and I'd raced with teams from 5 different countries, worked with engineers and mechanics from probably 15 different countries, traveled the world. And you compare yourself to a person in motorsport at the age of 24, or a driver at the age of 24, versus someone else, and the level of maturity is just completely different. And that's why when you look at Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, I'm not saying I was anywhere as good as Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, but I think the level of maturity you get from the sport is massive.
Yeah. I'm actually glad you said that. I mean, I'm 41 now, and these guys are more mature than I am now. And it's. I
Yeah,
mean, I remember looking. Yeah, you mentioned those two guys in particular, the two sort of like superstars at the moment, in their early to mid 20s. I was thinking when I was 24, I was a liability, but as you say, through your experiences, and obviously they've been, you know, similar to a degree with their path. I mean, you've got to have an old head on very young shoulders, haven't you? And you've got to be able to take the knocks.
yeah,
Even
exactly.
even with a lot of the British touring car drivers that I've spoken to, and they're still doing it now, and they're still, we had a guy, Jack Goff had to drop out yesterday just for whatever reason. And yeah, and it's tough, and and a lot of it, and you've touched on it, a lot of it comes down to the backing and to the finances, because it's never going to be cheap. I think we say this in every chat. People say, oh, it's all about money these days. Just take these days off the end of that. It's always been
Yeah,
about
yeah,
money,
of course.
and it always will be, won't it?
Yeah, and you have to have your eyes open, and I think I manage some young Indian drivers and other drivers through Motorsport UK that I speak to and give advice to, and I enjoy working with young drivers and try and share a bit of knowledge, whatever little bit I've gained over 20 years in the sport. And I think that's the first thing I would say to them is you've got to have your wits about you and have your eyes open. You have to dream, right? In the same way that I started this conversation by saying you're chasing a dream, and that keeps the fire burning and keeps the passion burning to keep going. But you can't also be a dreamer.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a fine balance.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, something that always comes up in these chats is when it comes to going racing. And obviously, you've touched on your career out in India, and pretty much everyone I've spoken to who's had a decent chunk of their career, not so much the youngsters at this stage, there's always a line that they come out with, and it's "and then I met
Mm.
someone." Was that the same with you? Was there someone who suddenly, when you came across them, whether they backed you or they guided you, was there anyone in those formative years,
Yeah,
I suppose,
100%.
that really stands out as being that guy or that woman or whoever it was?
100%. Bernie Eccleston. 100% Bernie. He was.
Not bad.
Yeah. No, he. Listen, I was very fortunate to have good sponsors and good backing from some good Indian companies. Companies like JK Tyre backed me from my very first race. But we reached a plateau in terms of how much that budget could stretch coming out of India, and Bernie was absolutely critical in 2007. At the end of 2006, we had no money. We were doing some work with my dad, and I were doing some work with him in India around TV rights and trying to get the Grand Prix to come to India, things like that. And
Yes.
I came to see him in September 2006. I went to his office, and it was just me and him. And again, this is the sort of stuff, right? I'm 22 years old with talking to the most powerful man in the sport,
Yeah.
probably one of the most powerful people in global sport
Yeah, in any
worldwide
sport. Yeah.
at the time.
Probably him and Roger Penske, isn't it? Probably the
A-
two.
And you've still got well, at that time it was unquestionably Bernie, and you
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
to make your case as a 22-year-old of why you wanted him to help and support and help to open some doors. And
Wow.
it's pretty daunting when you sit in. Bernie used to have this conference room and this sort of imposing pile of fake money on the side, and this stuff, all this sort of stuff around you, and you're
Wow.
sitting there, and
Goodness
he's
me.
much more relaxed these days now that he's basically retired. But at that time, but he was in the thick of running the sport, and
Yeah.
I'll never forget. Your conversations would always start with, "Yes, what can I do for you?" And you have to have an answer ready. You can't. There's no waffle. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
no, I think
true.
I was very fortunate at that stage that Bernie helped to open some doors and keep the process going.
Yeah. No, amazing. Wow. I can't imagine how daunting that must have been. I'd be terrified of Bernie now. So
Well, I was lucky by that stage. I'd met him enough times and spent enough time, even on holiday and stuff with him. So I knew him well enough. But
Right.
I still remember that day in September where it was, I was basically making a case to him as to why I needed a bit more than friendship to support.
Yeah. Wow. Very cool. Just have a quick look at some of the questions coming in.
Yeah,
Paul
sure.
Abbott's put
Yeah, there's a few
Paul,
I've seen.
just
Yeah.
say Paul Abbott's put a question in. We're going to come to that one at the end. Paul's a very big follower of the page. He works for Quick Fit. Very, 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 very nice guy. Something about the end of last season in F1, which we're going to come to very soon. Paul, do stay tuned. Also, we've got Mike Cole, whose daughter Kales has been on for a chat. She's out in Ireland, Irish karting champion. She's done F1000 things like that. She's very, very, very good. And Mike's just said that motorsport's a great discipline for kids, especially now with social media. They have to be so careful. And it hurts me financially, but it's great for Kales. And I think that's a good point, isn't it? There's so many eyes, even at lower levels. There's so many people that want to have a pop at you or, put you down,
Listen,
especially a female, unfortunately.
it's horrendous. Some of the comments that girls in motorsport get is absolutely appalling, and
Fully agree.
it's I feel so bad for them because it's one of the I think it's one of the few sports where as a driver, first of all, physically, I think men and women can compete on equal terms. But in terms of all the other roles within the sport, which is a much wider industry, right? Engineering, marketing, legal, commercial management, all this sort of stuff. You know, this is a sport where we should be, encouraging more women to participate, because we if you just line up an entire industry full of people with the same background who think the same way, then you don't grow.
Yeah, it's
The,
just
the
going to
industry
stagnate.
doesn't grow. You'll stagnate mentally and as a sport. So it's so I feel really bad. And when you see these comments that the girls get, often engineers and girls like that who are trying to go out there and inspire to make a difference. And it's ridiculous, the comments they get when people, mainly guys, go out there and question, what do you know, and what do you know about strategy and stuff. And some of the best strategists in Formula One today are the women on the pit walls. And it's yeah. Anyway, I hope that changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Just while we're on the subject, I mean, I wasn't going to
Mm.
bring this up, but the W Series now. Just while we're on that, we're touching it. Jamie Chadwick, double champion,
Yep.
and people. I've seen it all over social media. People have been saying that W Series quote has failed because
Mm.
Jamie Chadwick hasn't been snapped up by a sponsor or whoever it is to get. People seem to forget it's only been 2 years that the W Series has been on track. Obviously, with COVID in the middle of it.
Mm.
And it's not just about on track, as you say, it's about the engineers and all the ladies behind the scenes and all that kind of thing.
Mm.
And it's getting people into motorsport. And also W Series, it's as free to enter as motorsport can be.
Mm.
And it's all done on merit. And these ladies perhaps wouldn't have the opportunities to have drives, which is proved by Jamie Chadwick not going up into F3, F2, whatever it
Mm.
might be. And people still have a go at W Series. And I think they haven't given it the time, and perhaps they've misunderstood what the aim of it is. Obviously, the ultimate goal is to try and get a female into Formula One, but
Yeah.
that's not the be all and end all, is it?
So I was waiting for your question.
No, I'm just
um,
saying, what are your thoughts on it?
on
On the
W
W
series,
Series?
I think that it's fundamentally, I think it's good, right? I think it's good because it's inspiring a lot of young girls to go into karting. I think it's perhaps, as you rightly said, a bit premature and unrealistic to expect someone to go immediately before the category's been established in the pyramid.
Yeah,
But I think what I do think it perhaps needs is some sort of a prize fund for the winner. I know they've got, there's good prize money on offer and things like that, but I think having the next step on the ladder with a bit of backing, because they're able to, I think, go out there and raise some decent commercial um, budgets for the championship. And really, what you want is to have the opportunity for one of the girls to go into Formula 3 in FIA F3, but with a good team as well, right? Go, with a Prema or a Carlin, a good
yes,
team. So they have a good opportunity to learn from the engineers and how to operate against good teammates. And then you create that progression.
yeah,
And I think that is something that I think as a championship, they would perhaps benefit from to take it to the next level.
yeah, and that may be something that's in the pipeline. And as we say, it's only been it's only been 2 years. But of course, the profile's been raised with Caitlyn Jenner coming in. That's got a lot of people sort of noticed. It's got a lot of people noticing the series, which I think is going to be good.
Yeah.
But we'll have to see, won't we? But no, thank you.
Right. Do you want to do some of these questions? I can see.
We've got some more here. I did see one actually that was really good. Um, Gamer Queen, she's on YouTube. Your favorite F1 stat, both of you. I've got a great one, but I'm going to let you go first. If you have you got a favorite stat?
uh, I would say, it's a tricky one, because actually Crofty's the stat attack king, really. He's he is the one who sort of rattles it off at a whim. But I would say, I think one of my favorite seasons of Formula One is the 1997 F1 season. Villeneuve
Yeah.
versus Schumacher, lots of drama going on. And I think my favorite stat is 121.072, which is the lap time that the top three drivers did in the final round at Jerez. It We had 3 drivers,
Oh, the
Villeneuve, Schumacher, Frentzen,
tied.
all tied, and the championship decider. You literally couldn't make that up.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
so 121.072. That's my favorite stat of in F1.
That's a great one. I was going to go with my one. I forget the year, but it's a guy called Hans Heyer, and he attempted to qualify for a race. Was basically rubbish. Didn't qualify, but somehow started the race anyway. And then didn't finish. He retired after 7 or 8 laps, and he's the only man to have did not qualify, did not finish, and disqualified in the same race. So
Brilliant.
that's my favourite stat of all time. I love
Brilliant.
it. No, so that's my one. Her real name is Katara, Gamer Queen. So thank you, Katara. Right, 1977 for Hans Heyer. Thank you, Simon. There you go. That's the best one. Sorry, got a bit off track. Obviously, going back to your career, obviously you had some budget and some backing, and you won some titles out in India with like Formula Maruti and the Formula 2000 Asia, things like that. You came over to the UK. There was a test. Now, you mentioned Carlin briefly. You had a test with Carlin, didn't you, with Trevor Carlin Racing in British F3. How did that come about? Because he's got quite an eye for talent, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, we is actually one of his business partners, Martin Stone, was a very old friend of our family, and my dad knew Trevor. Trevor used to come out to India, and some of the engineers. So, in fact, at the time, the race engineer, a guy called Anthony Hyatt, better known as Boyo, he because he's Welsh, I've known him since I was 9 years old. He's one of my closest friends, and now he runs. He went on to start the Raikkonen Robertson racing team and Double R Racing as it's known now. So he was the engineer, Carlin. We knew Martin, Trevor. So it was one of these people. And obviously Narain Karthikeyan was racing with Carlin as well at the time in that era. So yeah, there's lots of connections to the team.
That was around what 2001.
That was 2001. Yeah, November 2001.
Yeah, and quite a team. To have your. I assume that was your first drive in Europe, and
yeah. It was first time. It was first time driving the rain as well.
Surprised.
We'd sort of escaped it out in Asia, so that was an eye-opening experience, I can tell you.
Oh, I'm sure it was. Yeah, I did a track day at Thruxton in one of these limited single-seater cars.
Yeah.
Great fun, and I had about 4 spots of rain on my visor, and I was like, oh, because I'm not a racer, I'm not at all. I just went out and I did it, and I had 4 spots, and I was panicking. So God knows how you must have felt in the rain.
Yeah.
But you're obviously far better than I am. Far better. So 2002, you came over to the British F3 Championship. Had a couple of years. Just got some stats here. You had 6th overall, I think, in that first season, with like 7 visits to the podium. I mean, that's pretty good for a first season in a very decent championship.
Yeah, look, I'm gonna kind of summarize here because rather than going through it all, but basically, I found racing in British F3 one of the most educational things I did. I grew up about 10 years in that 3-year phase because, as I said, I'd come from racing in India and Asia where you're pretty comfy, living at home with your parents, and it's all quite cushy in the sunshine. And then you come here and you're thrown into this championship, and the level in Europe is significantly higher than in Asia. I'm not counting Japan, but across the rest of Asia. So all of a sudden, it's a bit of a shock to the system. And, there were 3 very tough years where, we didn't really have a full budget and you're sort of cutting corners all the time to make it work. But I had, a couple of some really good people in the team, and there's still some of my best friends. Even today, I'm still doing business with people at T Sport who I came to race with. And, I was on the phone with them even 2 hours ago. Chatting about things. So, they became very much a big part of my life. And as I grew up an awful lot, but also learned an awful lot about how to be a professional driver. And, I would take the laptop home with all the data, and they were very good with me, letting me take the setup sheets and the data at home and let me spend hours and hours. I'd spend because as I said, it comes back to that original point where you're hungry to improve, and you have to have the mindset that if you're not doing the donkey work, then someone else is. And when I started the season, I was really struggling. I was way off the pace. I couldn't get within 6-7 tenths of my teammate. And he outqualified me the first half of the year, 12-0, Clivio Piccioni. It was very good kart driver and was decent in Formula 4 and stuff. He beat me 12-0 in the first half of the year, and then second half of the year, for some reason, an odd number of races, but I beat him 13, 12 or something like that, I think.
Right. Right. So it was just, and
that
that's just
doesn't
from.
that doesn't add up. So it must have been
No.
7-6 in the second half of the year. But I know I qualified him in the second 13. So yeah, so and then you just improve and you work and you get better and better. But yeah, it's a. Ooh, I like that. Sorry, I've just seen a comment pop up saying, "I hope Karun gets a drive in a Sierra RS 500 before he joins the BTCC." Yes, I am desperate to have a go in a Sierra RS 500. I remember Chris Hodges is actually a very good friend of mine. We used to work together at Silverstone. We used to work together at Silverstone Race School. I was always very jealous of him racing in that era. So, yeah, if anyone's got a Sierra RS 500 for me to have a go in, please give me a call.
Yeah, and then can I go afterwards? Can I? I want to go second. Actually, someone who's become quite good friends with me and the page is like Bradley Gravitt and his father Rob Gravitt, who obviously won the 1990 BCC in, to me, the RS 500. So yeah, maybe they can help. If you're watching, Rob and Brad, send me a message. Ask Andy Rouse. Yes, now there's an idea. Andy Rouse. Anyway, yes, lots of RS 500 love. Definitely fancy that. So yes, you've obviously,
so that was F3, and then then we had a couple of bad years, to be honest. In 2005, 2004, I ran out of money. 2/3 of the way through F3, and then 2005 we did a few rounds of World Series. Again, ran out of money. Did a couple of rounds of A1 GP. The whole thing was a bit smelly and messy with the Indian team, and I sort of walked away from that situation. But I had no money, so went back to Asia. Managed to get a deal to race in Asia in 2006, and then won the championship out there, which was quite nice, to be honest, because I had 3 pretty tough years, 4 tough years in Europe. So actually having that year in 2006 in Asia was good to just catch my breath and just I was back living at home with my family and just catching my breath a little bit.
It's like decompress a bit.
Yeah, the intensity of a 18-year-old moving across the world, you can't underestimate that from a mental standpoint. And then, as I said, I got lucky, and Bernie helped to open a couple of doors, and then I got a deal with Red Bull to do GP2, and I was the last driver to get signed on the grid for GP2 in 2007 with the team that I finished last in the previous season.
Yes.
We had a budget of 700,000 euros when a top budget was 1.5 million. So, but we made it work and won a race and scored points on every weekend of the second half of the season, and regularly fighting with for the point in the top 6 towards the end of the year. So it was that was a big year to reestablish myself in Europe, and yeah, that was a bit of the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just seen someone's just mentioned that if you're to join the BTCC, would you turn to your good mate Jason Plato? Diffan, when we're finished, just head back to the very first knockings of the interview. We've had a bit of a chuckle about Jason. Fun times. Very quickly, John Kane, who's a marshal up at Knockhill in Scotland.
Right.
Huge shout out to all the marshals. Couldn't go racing without them. Absolute heroes. Have you been to Knockhill?
Yeah, of course. I've raced there 2002, 3, and 4.
It's
3
cool,
years.
isn't it?
Well, you know what? We had 1 year where I could not believe it. We were in t-shirt weather. I think it was 2000 and
unheard of.
4 or 3, one of them. Anyway, it was ridiculous. It was t-shirt weather. Yeah, we used to stay. There's a lovely little B&B in a town called Aberdour, near the coast, about 20 minutes away. And I really enjoyed it. It was a bit of a roller coaster. Bit like racing at Anglesey. We used to go testing in Anglesey with F3, and I loved it. I loved the feeling in a Formula 3 car. It was a very quick circuit in an F3 car because it's so narrow.
Yeah.
And the lap time was like, I think it was 50 odd seconds, 52 seconds or something. So I loved it. It was great fun.
Yeah, fantastic. I was at Knockhill. I was up in Scotland with the family last weekend, not the Easter weekend, the weekend before, and we came back and I saw Knockhill and I dropped in. It was freezing. It was absolutely freezing. It was about 4 degrees, and then the wind came whipping up through the pits, and it's absolutely freezing.
Yeah,
And
I
then
believe
the
that.
following day, I was getting flew back, and then the following day, I was getting sunburned to Thruxton. Who knows? But no, great. That was great. So you mentioned about GP2, and while we're talking about circuits and roller coasters and whatnot, GP2, you had a win on a circuit that fits that bill at Spa. Absolutely fantastic circuit. Probably one of my favourites. I've actually got one of these track outlines just above my door out there. One of your preferred circuits to drive, is it one that you
You
enjoy?
know what? Less so now.
Yeah,
I think it's been ruined a little bit
and they're still doing it, aren't they?
by all the tarmac runoffs. You know, I used to the challenge of Eau Rouge. You know, you'd come through and the gravel would be on the edge of the track, and you go through Pouon, and this feeling of coming through the corner and you go, whoa, got away with it because you just kiss the gravel and get away. That's gone
Wow.
now. You know, if you make a mistake at Blanchimont, you got all this acres of runoff, and
Yeah,
I
yeah,
feel like tracks have lost that challenge a little bit.
yeah. That
So
little hint of on the edge.
yeah, you know, so I think when I first went to Spa in Formula 3, it was still like that, and it was fantastic.
Yeah,
When I raced in GP2 as well, it was still lots more gravel than we have now. But I remember going back with sports cars and thought it's just the challenges. It's gone away, you know.
yeah,
So
yeah. Of
yeah, listen, it's still a great circuit, but
course.
I'd say less of a favorite now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm kind of with you on the gravel and the runoff and things. I've been saying it for years. You know, gravel worked years ago, but we didn't want cars flipping. Now cars are safer if they do flip.
Mm.
Drives are generally okay. So bring back gravel. Slow cars down. Make it a penalty if you go off. I've always said that. But I'm not a racer, so I don't listen to me. So yes, that was Spa. Just say when you were racing in GP2, I've just got a list of some of the guys that were on the grid here. Really competent grid. We've got like Timo Glock and Lucas Di Grassi, Luca Filippi, Kazuki Nakajima, who had an issue with in Turkey. I remember that. Bruno Senna, Pastor Maldonado, Vitaly Petrov, Mike Conway, Sebastian Buemi. I mean, really
Yeah,
strong grid. Guys that have gone on to
Grosjean
be
was it? Grosjean,
Grosjean.
Pantano,
Oh,
um, Hulkenberg.
yeah,
There's yeah, Alvaro Parente. You know, it was great. It was very enjoyable racing. By then, I had a bit more confidence, and if I'm honest, I felt a bit more suited to a bigger, more powerful, heavier car than I did to the F3 car. I felt a
right.
bit more comfortable with the ground effects and the way the GP2 worked. And it was just great racing. It was tough. It was competitive. We were all working hard. We were all chasing that final dream step of getting to F1. But we also respected each other enough. We travel, like I used to remember, we'd get on the EasyJet flight and there'd be Conway, Carroll, Bruno, Degrassi, myself, and there'd be about 8, 10 of us all getting on the same flight, and we get to Ricard, and the test would finish at 6 o'clock, and you'd all be rushing to try and make the 9:40 flight back out of Nice to get back home in the evenings, and it was great times, and you were
Wow.
those big traveling circus on track, ferociously competitive, really, really tough, hard racing. But off track, we were all, we got to a stage where I think you're a bit older than when you first start in junior
Yeah.
formula. You're a bit more respectful, and yeah, it was great. And I got to work with some very, very good people, especially 2008. The team I worked with, iSport,
Yeah.
brilliant team, really, really good team of people, very, very clever people, but also a great team atmosphere. And Bruno and I we got on like a house on fire.
Yeah.
And we're still, we're still very, very good friends, and we were teammates in 3 different categories, which is pretty unique.
Wow. Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
so no, that I think that in terms of like enjoyment of racing, I think 2008 was certainly ranks as one of the best.
No, terrific. Great stuff. Love hearing stories like that. Excellent. And I've just seen that, that year you got awarded the Best Driving Style Award, which is nice. Nice little.
I don't remember that, but if you say
Yeah,
so.
apparently, yeah, that's what I've dug out from somewhere. So, yeah, happy days. You had one more year with Ocean Technology Racing. It was just one podium. Wasn't quite as successful as the year before. Was that expected that year, or was it just
Yeah, I mean, I parted company with Red Bull at the end of 2008, so we had less of a budget. And then Ocean were a new team coming to GP2, so they wanted some experienced drivers. So Parente and I went there, but with a new team, you have teething troubles.
Yeah.
And had weekends where we were incredibly quick, and then we had weekends where we were absolutely nowhere. But we had some reliability issues as well. I mean, probably my most frustrating, painful day in a race car was Monaco 2009, because I'd done the hard work of getting um, getting the first corner first, beating Pastor off the line, and then led the race the entire way. I'd pulled 2.5 seconds to Pastor, and I think we were nearly 20 seconds ahead of D'Ambrosio and Hulkenberg in third and fourth. We disappeared, the two of us, and the drive shaft broke, and it was one of those things where a new the experienced teams know when you go to Monaco, you got to change both the drive shafts. And I think being a new team, they only changed one side that seemed a bit more worn, and
Right.
it snapped the other side. So lost the win with 8 laps to go. I drank a lot of tequila that night.
I'm sure. A win at
uh,
Monaco. Oof.
yeah. So yeah, it was a bit of a frustrating year, 2009, because as I said, we had some good potential. I remember races like Turkey. I qualified fourth or fifth. I think, and the car was good. And then we had a clutch issue on the grid, and I couldn't select first gear. I just sat there with the engine running in neutral, and it's just stuff like that. We had quite a few weekends with issues.
Yeah. A shame. 'Cause, it sounds like when the car went, it went.
Yeah.
It went well. Following year, of course, the big move, Formula One, HRT or the Hispania Racing Team. Obviously, it was like newly founded team, I believe,
Yeah.
that year, wasn't it? How did all that come about, and what did you think when you sort of signed a contract? Did you think, oh, I'm an F1 driver? Did you ever think that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Listen, it's a culmination of a dream, right? It doesn't matter if you're at the back of the grid, but it's a culmination of a dream. When you rock up in the paddock for the first Grand Prix, um, you're one of that select group who get to drive the cars, and nobody, once you've ticked that box, and had that experience of being a Grand Prix driver, nobody can take that away from you. You're a Grand Prix driver for life. So yeah, huge moment. Huge culmination of dream. I had the opportunity to drive F1 cars before, because I was a test driver at Red Bull, being on their junior driver program. So I've driven F1 cars before, but being a race driver is something different completely. The pressures and attention and all the rest of it that comes and the politics of it all. There's a whole lot of other stuff. But I was very lucky when I got to Bahrain, which was the first race that year. 2010, if you remember, that was the year Michael Schumacher was making his comeback to the sport
Yes.
with Mercedes.
Yeah.
And Michael was one of my heroes. I had a poster on the wall, and I'll never forget this. And I told Mick the story as well, because I really appreciate it. But when I got to the paddock, Michael was the first driver who came, and he came to me and introduced himself and wanted to say hello and said welcome to F1, and had a polite chat for 5 minutes, asking about my background and where I was from and all this sort of stuff. And he didn't need to do that. He was the biggest star that the sport had by far at that time. Bigger than Lewis, bigger than Fernando, bigger than anybody. And I was a nobody, and I always appreciate that about Michael.
Yeah, I think that's a mark of, to me, it's not just the results and the wins and the trophies and everything. That's the mark of like not just a champion driver, but a champion sort of person. I mean, I
Yeah.
spoke to Alex Caffey on one of these when he joined Osella. I think it was back in 85, 6. And he said the first person that, he was this like young kid in the paddock. And the first person that came over to him and introduced, much like Michael Schumacher did with you, was Ayrton Senna. And he said, and you used the phrase that he came over and like introduced himself, as if he had to,
Yeah.
And he said a similar thing. He said it was an amazing, just what.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's Michael. In every subsequent time I spoke with him, I spent time with him. He couldn't be nicer. And yeah, what's happened to him with the skiing accident is one of the greatest tragedies, really.
Absolutely.
For a guy who spent his years in a very dangerous sport to basically come out the other side of his career okay, and then to have had that happen to him is just awful.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, honestly, it's a very guarded subject, and rightly so. We
Mm.
don't have the right to pry, and
Yeah, sure.
I don't think anyone does, and I think they're managing it very well. But if it's by some miracle, if Michael or anyone involved does see this, we are all still thinking of him, aren't we? And hoping that things aren't perhaps as bad as people might assume, and maybe, one day he can get back to something where he was before. Because absolute legend, lovely guy. But yeah, so that first season, you mentioned Bruno Senna. He was your teammate.
Hmm.
Again, as you said, he must have had some pressure with his surname being what it was.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you think that he was sort of perhaps judged, against the achievements of
Yeah, but
Uncle
of course he
Anthony?
was, right? That's the that's the reality of his
Bound to
situation.
happen,
Is
isn't
of
it?
course it was going to happen, but um, yeah, listen, uh, Uncle Ayrton, as I used to call him, was is one of the greatest drivers of all time. Not I used to call Ayrton. That's how I'll refer to Ayrton to Bruno, just so I'm clear.
Yeah,
uh, but Ayrton was, you know, he's got to be in everybody's top five, if not top three, list of drivers of all
well,
time, right?
that's
So,
him there. Got a
well,
bit
there
of
you go.
artwork there. He's, him
Yeah,
and Nigel are my two,
yeah, yeah. So and that's a tough yardstick for anyone, and it's tough for these guys. Look at Damon, look at Jacques,
yeah, of course.
Nico. All of these guys, and um, Max, even for example.
Yeah.
And it's
Now Mick
yeah,
as well.
Mick, of course. Yeah, no, the pressure that comes with that is massive.
Wow.
Um, there's a
Yeah.
couple of good questions here, by the way. Sorry, I know you've
Yeah,
got a
no,
bit of a
I was
script,
just I
but
was
there
just
is.
glancing at them.
Yeah,
Um,
but I was wondering if you. There's one here from Sam Miguel asking, "Try to get hands dirty and do some spannering." Well, actually,
yes.
I did a lot actually because my dad used to run a race in a rally team, and I used to love spannering the cars. I used to put the little single seaters on the flat patch myself and set it up. I used to do all the setup on the cars and adjust it all, set it all up, and it was good for me to learn actually because I would then jump in the car, drive it, and understand what the changes did
Yeah.
and things. So yeah, no, I'll never pretend that I'm capable of building a car to the same level as a mechanic, but
Mm,
I did enough to learn how you put the gears into a gearbox and how you put the suspension together and bits and pieces.
yeah. And maybe get a feel for the car if it's not quite right. You might have a
Yeah,
bit
I
more of
think
a
you
knowledge.
learn. You learn for sure.
Yeah. No, that was a great question. Thank you, Sam. That's a good one. No, we'll come to that. Come to that towards the end about rituals and stuff. Just again in F1. I mean, what were you thinking the first time you went out for the qualifying, and when you first got in the car, when you first drove it? Did you just think, wow? Because I mean, it must be an amazing. I mean, you said you'd driven them before, but in a race or qualifying environment, did it feel that much different?
Well, the first time I drove the Hispania car was in qualifying, which was
Of course, you didn't do
barking
any
mad,
testing, did
ridiculous,
you?
because they couldn't get the car ready in time for free
Yeah,
practice events. So my first lap was qualifying. So Bahrain was a bit of a shambolic weekend, if I'm honest. But once we got to Melbourne, that was the first proper weekend. You can't be overawed with the situation. Then when you're in it, you have to. You're. I think it's only on reflection. I think only, to be honest, it's only probably in more recent years where you do conversations like this and interviews like this when you sit and take stock of your career and talk about things that happened 10, 12 years ago, that you think that was actually quite a big thing to be on the grid. But when you're in it, you're just focused on doing the best job you can. You
what you're
don't
doing.
allow yourself, you just can't, because there's so much going on and your brain has to be you know on it every minute of the race.
Yeah.
So no,
Wow.
you can you only look at it in reflection. And it's similarly for I think, to be honest, the probably the one time I did have a minute of just going, wow, this is cool, was actually at Le Mans. um in 2012, the first year I did Le Mans.
Mm.
It was the first time I was the first Indian to do the 24-hour race,
Right. Okay.
which was
Didn't
it was
realize that.
pretty cool. And
Very cool. Yeah.
um, there was a moment I remember coming out of the S's, and you look and there's a campsite and a whole bunch of Indian flags, and at that point I was going, these people. And it was a miserable year. It had rained nonstop all
Mm,
week.
mm.
I remember thinking, it's pretty amazing that all these people have shown up in a to stay in the mud for me.
Wow,
And that
yeah.
was
Wow.
quite a sort of emotional moment, really. But
I bet it was.
it,
Yeah.
it lasts about half a second, and then you crack on and get on with it.
And you're off, yeah.
But
It's just
yeah,
a nice little moment to have, though, isn't it? That,
yeah, but
but it's like knowing that they're there for you as well, which is, wow.
yeah, but I think you have to listen. Ultimately, there's also lots of dangers and risks and things involved in the sport, and you can't afford to let yourself get distracted by stuff.
Yeah, of course, of course. Um, one thing that I've always wondered, again, that first season in F1, you had some, you finished the next 3 or 4 races, and then you had a retirement. Monaco, um,
Yeah.
Jarno Trulli. Obviously, I've got nothing against Jarno Trulli. He's a very, very good racing driver. You don't go for a lunge at the Rascas, do you?
No,
Surely.
he was being shouted at by Tony Fernandez and the rest
Oh,
of the
was
pit wall.
he?
I think, yeah. Tony called me on the Monday to apologize and said, "I'm really sorry. It was partly my fault because I kept shouting at them, saying, tell him to overtake." And he had lunch. And Jano was at the next race. He came and gave me a case of wine to apologize and said, "Here, you know, sorry, I nearly took your head off. Have a case of Yano truly wine." So no, listen, he's a lovely man, Yano. I have a lot of time and respect for him. He's a lovely guy. So it's one of
Yeah.
those things.
Yeah, it happens. I mean, perhaps that one shouldn't have happened, but I mean, it was spectacular. It was, it was one of those things. But yeah, my too unfortunate because you were 14th, I think, at the time, weren't you? So
Yeah, I can't remember, but yeah,
yeah,
no, it was one of our better races. But Tel
yeah,
Aviv.
one of those things. Again, a few more, finishes. Got to the end of all the races and all very good. And wasn't what actually happened midway through that season because you found yourself without the drive.
Well, basically, the team needed money, and Sakon Yamamoto came with a truckload of it of Japanese yen, and it was pretty simple. The team went, "Well, this is the sort of money he's offering for the seat, so we needed to keep going. Sorry, see you
Wow.
later."
I mean,
Uh,
obviously it's business, but I mean, that must have been disappointing.
of
It
course,
must have been.
it's brutal. It's brutal, absolutely brutal.
Yeah, sure it
But
was.
but what do you do? And the team tell you that the numbers, and it's not right for me to say what the numbers were, but there were
Yeah,
lots of zeros on the end of it. Um, it's obviously not something I had lying around, so you haven't got a choice, really.
yeah. No, sure. It's just and as you say, it goes back to the money these days phrase.
Hmm.
It's always money, isn't it? You can't go racing without money. Um, Following year, obviously, you time for Lotus
Hmm.
test driver. I guess was that through Mr. Fernandez? Was that
Hmm.
through him?
Yeah, it was a very frustrating year because I had a contract with Tony to do a certain number of races as part of the deal, including the Indian GP, and I ended up doing the German Grand Prix,
Yeah.
which wasn't a race in my contract, and then you know the whole thing just fell apart. It was probably my least enjoyable year if of motor racing, if I'm
Really?
honest. When you're a test and reserve driver, the team really don't care what you think. You're just sort of there for the sake of it. When you're doing
Provide
free
the race.
practice sessions, nobody really listens to you because you're driving someone else's car. The other drivers hating you because you're driving their car. Um, and it's just a horrible atmosphere, and you're just hanging around getting frustrated all year because you want to be driving and instead you're just hanging around watching it. So the best way for me to deal with my frustrations was actually to start doing commentary. And,
Yeah.
I started doing Five Live with Crofty on, the weekends
I
when,
remember, yeah.
when
I remember it.
Anthony was there. I'd go and do the practice sessions with Crofty and Ant. And then on the weekends that Ant couldn't come, I'd go and do the races with qualifying and races with Crofty. So, that was my way of keeping sane. Otherwise, I would just lose plot. But in the end, Tony broke the contract and broke the deal, and we had to come to a settlement out of court. And it was all,
Yes.
very messy and smelly. But yeah, not an enjoyable year.
No, no, sure, sure. It's a shame. Yeah, which I thought was a shame. I mean, that sort of brings us on to a question that I saw early on about, where were we? This is the only thing about this thing. I can't ever get there to where I want to be quickly. Um, Anyway, it said, do you think that, what do you think you could have done if you could have had an opportunity in some better machinery at the time? I mean,
I
obviously,
think,
it's all ifs and buts, and we don't know. But
yeah, I think I'm now in hindsight probably realistic and pragmatic enough to you know I was never going to be in the Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc category. I'm pretty realistic about that. I think I could have had a, a career as a very decent Grand Prix driver, given the right tools and the right car and the right opportunity. I think there's so few drivers who are, was I world champion material? Probably not. Was I good enough to win races and get podiums in the right cars and the right circumstances on a day when the stars align? I'd like to believe so.
yeah,
But the
I
reality
always
is
thought so.
you'll never know. So yeah.
Yeah, but
I'm slightly conscious of time if you're going on this year by year, by the way. So
yeah, no, I am gonna just no, I am gonna. I was looking at the time myself. I am gonna rattle through some of the next bits. I don't want to keep anyone too long.
yeah.
Obviously, you mentioned about Le Mans and alongside David Brown and Peter Dunbrek. Spoke with David on here, which was fantastic. Just very very quickly, what makes Le Mans so special? I mean, obviously it's the endurance, it's the ultimate thing. But as a driver, is it just one of those?
It's just a
fabulous
fantastic
things?
race. Everything about well, let me start again. Everything in the build up to 3 p.m. on Saturday is a bit of a drag. It just goes on and on. You're there for a week in a camper van, and it just drags on and on and on. But when you get into the actual 3 p.m. and the race goes green, it is fantastic. It's just a brilliant racetrack. It's a tough race. The weather changes all the time. Temperature changes all the time. Track conditions change. The traffic. It's it is a huge challenge to compete at that race, and that's part of the joy you get. When you're racing on the middle of the night, you can't see where it's wet, where it's dry. You got to choose whether you want slicks, wets, or intermediates, and trying to get the right call and not shunt and all that sort of stuff. It's a fantastic event.
No, fantastic. I'm so glad you said that because everyone I've spoken to who's done Le Mans, I always ask, did you like it or not? I mean, obviously David Brabham and Stephanie Hansen, they've won the thing, so they said they loved it. But I remember, I think it was Steve Soper who's driven many, 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 many cars, not far from here, up the road, and he hated it. He said he hated.
Yeah, but
mainly at night. I think he didn't.
but
I think it was raining at night.
Uncle Steve is the grumpiest man in motorsport, so that's his gig. I love Steve. I absolutely he lives 5 minutes from my house, and I absolutely love Steve to bits, but he is the grumpiest man in motorsport. It's very
funny. He's
very funny.
He doesn't smile often. I caught up with him for a coffee at a place near the Model Village, just round the corner.
Oh yeah, Beaconsfield.
Yeah, it was in Beaconsfield. There's a little cafe on the right. I forget what it's called. Anyway, caught up with him for a coffee there, and nice bloke, but deadpan. Moving very quickly onwards, we're going to skip over a few bits, but Formula E you had in the inaugural season. What was the appeal of Formula E? Was it just something new and different?
Yeah. I knew Alejandro Agag because he owned a GP2 team, a Campos GP2 team, and I was racing there. So we'd been friends and known each other for a bit. And when he was starting the series, I talked to him about doing a bit of the testing and development work on the thing. And then we got chatting, and he said, "Look, why don't you try and help me to get an Indian team into the championship?" Right. So I spent a year working with Alejandro to secure the Mahindra entry into the championship. So, I had a deal to race with them in the first year, but a lot of the donkey work I spent, was done before to get them into the series. And it was fascinating as well, right? Because it allowed me to see a different side to the sport, from a sort of consultancy role, being this in-between person, trying to bring a person into a massive conglomerate into a new, pretty niche championship. Was a fascinating process when you're trying to put that deal together. And, I learned an awful lot about it, the things that I do differently. But doing Formula E itself was interesting because it was, this whole new thing of going racing, electric cars. Nobody had really thought about that before, or maybe they thought about it not taking the plunge. The racing itself, especially in season 1, was a bit frustrating. We started off pretty competitively. I think we had a 6th and a 5th in the first couple of races, and we probably arguably should have won the second round in Malaysia. We had an issue in the pit stop. But then we just lost competitiveness. I think other teams developed and we plateaued. And then I found it, when you haven't got the efficiency of other people, you just get more and more frustrated because you're having to lift and coast more and more, and other people aren't, and the whole thing goes into a spiral of frustration, really. So, I think it was really interesting to do. The circuits were fun. There's some really interesting, fun circuits like Buenos Aires, and Malaysia was good. Putrajaya, the street circuits were fun to do, I think. It was certainly interesting. And now I go back and I do the TV stuff for them, and I'm going to the next race in Monaco, in fact, to do some stuff. And it's an interesting championship. It hasn't exploded in the way that they were hoping.
Yeah,
If you look
at
their
view, isn't it, at the moment?
So we'll have to see where they go in the next few years.
Yeah, sure. Just seen a question from my good friend Gavin Delman. Evening, Gav. He's actually coming to the Indy 500 with me in 5 weeks' time.
Are you guys going? Oh, you're lucky guy. I've never been. I'd love to go.
I've been wanting to go since Rick Mears won it in 1988. Even though it was behind the pace car, I thought I was 7. I thought I fancy a bit of that, and it was supposed to be for my 40th last year, but we didn't go. But we're going this year.
I'm gonna work on it for next year.
Oh, I can't wait. I'm so excited. And I'm sure Gavin is as well. We've got a few other guys coming as well. Obviously, I was just going to lead on to your media work now with Sky, but he's got a great question there. It says, evening, guys. Karun, what, if anything, have you learned about F1 as a pundit that you didn't know as a driver? That's a far too clever a question from Gavin. I think he's read that somewhere.
I think you can't actually compare, because the problem is the sport changes and evolves so much. The sport, look at what we've got this year, such a big reset of the rules, and the rules change and the sport evolves and things just change all the time. I suppose the one thing I have learned, because when I raced, I obviously raced with 2 small teams at the back of the grid, and I think now working as a pundit, it's allowed me to have some insight and spend time with people like Toto and people like Matteo Binotto and Andreas Seidel, and spend time at the big team factories, and see the scale of the level that they operate at, compared to the teams at the back of the grid. And I think that's the one thing I have learned, is just how much better the teams at the front of the grid are, in terms of everything that they do.
The whole
so yeah, I'd say that's probably the thing that I've learned more, is just what the differences are between the big and the small teams.
Yeah, no, excellent, great answer, excellent question, Gav. Well done. I'll buy you a drink. Just moving quickly on to, obviously, you're now working with Williams Heritage, and as I said at the start, big fan of the team. Always have been. It's what got me into F1. You've driven some amazing cars, some of the Williams cars. I just want to get your quick thoughts on just some of the cars that you've driven, not necessarily Williams. One that I remember was when you drove the BT26, the Brabham. That looked fantastic. What a car that was! What a beautiful machine.
It was a beautiful car. It's owned by the Rofco collection. It's a beautiful car, but it was more actually what a special day that was, because it was a car to celebrate Frank's 50 years in the sport as a team principal. And Jonathan had rebuilt and restored this car along with the guys from Rofco as a surprise for Frank. And we were in the pits at Silverstone, and it was the first time that Frank's entire family had been at the track together since his wife Jenny Williams had passed away. And Claire and Jamie and Johnny, his 3 children, and his grandchildren were there. And they sort of wheeled Frank around into the pits, and he saw the car and his face just lit up. And it was a horrendously wet and miserable Silverstone day. And I went off, and it was just me driving the car around, and Frank was there on the pit wall watching with his whole family, watching this car run for the first time in 40 or 50 years. And it was an incredibly emotional day for the entire family and for Frank. So yeah, the car itself was was fun to drive. Quite narrow, I remember. It was quite difficult to actually change gear in it, but it was more about the rest of the day. I think was special.
Yeah, the whole occasion. Yeah, I can remember seeing it on TV and thinking,
Mm.
wow. And you could see, Frank comes across as I've never met Frank sadly, but he comes across as being quite hard, but you could tell he was having a wobble. You could tell he
Mm.
was that really meant a lot to him.
Yeah, it's a great day.
Yeah, fantastic. The W10, Mercedes W10.
Mm.
That must have been fun. It looked fun.
Yeah, no, brilliant car and a great race team. In some ways, I'd say it was. I mean, well, no, unquestionably the most perfect race car I've ever driven. The most perfect car I've ever driven. It was just everything just worked. It was brilliant. It was well sorted. No wonder it dominated the world championship. Um, but from an emotional standpoint, it didn't. It didn't. Light the spark. It didn't
It
light the
didn't get your
fuse in the
heart
same
going.
way. In the same way that a Mansell 14B or a
Mm,
even the FW26, 2004 car V10 with
mm.
19,000 RPM, absolute screaming beast. I think nowadays the cars have gotten too heavy. It's a problem we have in modern F1. It's a 798. It's nearly the same weight as a sports car,
Oh,
and
wow.
I think that's wrong. For
Yeah,
me, that's one of the biggest things that's I'd like seen changed in the sport. The cars are now nearly 200 kilos. They're 193 kilos heavier than the 2004 car for
wow.
more or less the same amount of horsepower, maybe a little bit more horsepower. And I think that's wrong.
Takes the thrill out of it, I think, for
Yeah, I think it's it.
you. And I guess
No,
it's
listen,
just,
it's
yeah,
still thrilling, right?
of
A
course.
Grand Prix car, Formula One car is still thrilling, but it's taking that awe-inspiring, you know,
That wow.
that wow factor of, oh my god, this thing is about to bite me at every input I make. I feel like this thing is going to spit me off in the hedge, which I think as a young driver getting into F1, you should feel that sense of awe that this is something so extraordinary. Whereas now, I think the cars, because they're so heavy and they're a bit, they're less agile and they don't react as sharply.
Yeah,
um, you have a bit more time to react to it. So you feel like you can get in and you see a driver who's not particularly successful in Formula Two get into the F1 car and get within half a second of the pace within a day of testing. And I think that's
yeah,
wrong.
yeah.
It shouldn't be that straightforward.
No, sure, sure. Two more cars I want to mention. Obviously, my hero was Nigel
Mm,
FW14B. You mentioned it. Extraordinary car, active suspension, and all that.
mm. Brilliant.
That
Yeah,
was
yeah. I mean, it's a screensaver on my phone. It's it is and listen, I got in 20 must have been 2017. I got to drive the 14B on Saturday evening and Sunday morning, Grand Prix weekend, British Grand Prix. Crowd are there, going down Hanger Straight at Stowe, and you see the crowd. It's like I could hear Murray Walker's voice.
oh,
It was you know the more from an emotional standpoint, the best driving experience I've ever had in my life. An incredible car, so far ahead of its time. And you think of the names: Patrick Head, Adrian Newey, Paddy Lowe, Mansell, Patrese, Damon. The names involved in that project.
yeah.
Brilliant car
Wow.
and great engine, great car.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that because I love that car. I'd have hated there to be any other answer. Final one, FW15B. Was that Damon's? Is that Damon's one? Is it 15B? Can't remember.
The Damon Championship car.
Yes,
No, 18. FW 18.
18. Sorry, 18. And I know that my friend Gavin, who asked the question, I know he loves that car. So I
Mm.
just ask you very quickly.
Yeah, no, not listen. The Damon. To be honest, the 17 was a very good car in '95. It was just a combination of unreliability and some strategic issues and driver errors and stuff. In '95, Williams got 12 out of 17 pole positions and didn't win either championship. So it was a quick car.
Yeah,
And the 18 was an evolution of it, just a bit more refined, and Adrian had done obviously more work on the aero. But Damon always jokes that it was the first car that his size 13 feet fit in comfortably, and he won the championship. So, yeah, no, listen, a good car because when you drive it, it's balanced and it's comfy and confidence inspiring and does all the things that you think. I remember driving the Jordan 191 last year, and it was the same thing. It's just a beautifully balanced, great race car, and everything. You turn the wheel, it's predictable. It doesn't do anything unusual, and that's a sign of a great car.
Fantastic. So jealous. No, terrific. Just want to touch on something that came up today. We've got to skip over quite a lot of things I'd love to talk about because of time. But message from a guy called Michael Hipperson. He put something on Facebook, and he said that you were instrumental in raising thousands for the Little Havens Children's Hospice at Brooklands, and he just wanted me to say thank you very much for that.
Yeah, very welcome, Michael.
Wonderful thing to do. We love that. Obviously, you're now at Motorsport UK alongside Hugh and all the guys there, doing some great work. Thoroughly agree with your stance on the Ukraine situation and all that. I'm glad you guys took that stance. Not anything against any particular country, but just to stand up against something that's inherently wrong. I thought that was the right thing to do, personally. So great stuff. Very quick points I just want to run through at the end. It came up earlier on. Honestly, your thoughts on what happened. This is the elephant in the room, isn't it? 2021 Abu Dhabi. What happened?
Oh, God, we're not going back to that, are we?
Not for long. I'm sick of hearing about it as well, but obviously,
listen, it's straightforward, right? I think it's a straightforward answer anyway. The reality is, I think there were two better ways the end of that race could have been handled. One, red flag it, but I think they didn't have the opportunity because the brakes on Latifi's car caught fire, and so therefore it was a bit too late to create a red flag. Because if they had red flagged it, you wouldn't have finished the race because you have to do the formation lap. And in which case, they should have left the lap cars in between Lewis and Max. I think Max would have passed. If you think about it, he would have passed, probably 3 other lap cars by the time he got to turn 5. He would have passed the other 2 before he got to turn 6. And then he would have had the last half of the lap on a fresh set of tires with a 3-second tire delta hunting Lewis down. And they would have got to the last corner of the last race, the last lap, and fought for the win and probably had a crash and would have been great telly anyway. So I think that's, but for all the trolls out there who went on and on all winter long about how this was some premeditated plan against Lewis, I don't believe that. I think unfortunately Michael Massey, I think, made a mistake.
Yes,
but he was a guy who was under a huge amount of pressure with 20 people shouting opinions at him, and I think with all the other stuff, I think the system didn't help him. Yeah. And if I'm honest, I'm disappointed that he's lost his job. I understand why. There's a lot of external pressure from various sides and the public, but actually, I think it was the system that failed rather than, Michael was.
He was
having to do, he was doing all sorts of other work, single-seater commission, inspecting circuits. He was going to Formula E weekends. He was doing all this other stuff that the FIA was put onto his portfolio, rather than letting him just be Formula One race director. And you get to the end of the season and people make mistakes, and he's only human.
Yeah,
and I feel bad for the way he's been treated.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, people make mistakes. We all do. I made one at work today. It happens. It's just that one. It was just in the public eye, and so many people got on his back. I mean, it was on Twitter especially. It was just.
Oh, we can go on about it. It was just relentless.
Yeah, I mean, I just for my 2p, whatever it's worth. I always thought, it didn't bother me that who won it, Max or Lewis. I'm with you though. I think you either, you just let the cars go in formation. That's how it stopped. That's how it should start. And then you see what happens from there. It felt just a little bit contrived in my book. Not one way or another, but it was a case of let's have a shootout, and it didn't sit right with me. That's all. But no, it certainly wasn't premeditated. Absolutely. Anyone that says to the contrary is talking nonsense, I'm afraid. Right. Fun questions. Always wind down with some fun questions. Actually, I did see one more question I'm going to take, then we're going to have a quick run through. It was a great question, and it's been asked many, many times. There's always going to be comparisons between Lewis and Michael and Ayrton and Alan Prost and Niki Lauda and all these guys. And and we all know there's no definitive answer as to who the best ever is, because I mean it's all subjective to era and
Mm.
technology and all that kind of thing. Is there anyone that you'd put above the rest, or is it all dependent on era?
No, it's impossible. It is impossible, and I think, um, you have to say, and everyone's got different reasons to admire each drivers. My heroes were Jim Clark, Mario Andretti, and Alain Prost, and
Oh,
for
Jim Clark, of course. Yeah,
different reasons. So, yeah, I think it's one of those things. It's great fun to be a pub conversation, but it's something you can never definitively answer. I've just seen this question from someone saying, "Why do I tend to write Lewis Hamilton off?" And it drives me mad when people say this, because I get within about 3 minutes there'll be somebody saying, "Why are you against Max Verstappen? And you're such a British biased person commenting all about Lewis."
you can't
And
win.
it's the funny thing is, you have to just look through. If you look through the columns and tweets and stuff that I do, I think I make an effort to admire brilliance and greatness. I look at Bahrain last year, for example. Lewis, so it was one of his best wins actually
Yeah,
in a clean, dry race, and it was sensational. He absolutely won it. But on a weekend um, where he's off form and below par of the Lewis Hamilton that we know, such as Saudi Arabia, you have to call that out.
of course you
When
do.
on a weekend when he's out in Q1, and I think that's and I admire and respect people's passion and their love for a certain driver. I think it's important for us as individuals to have an opinion
Hmm.
and to have some conviction in our opinions, even though it might upset a certain fan base.
Yeah, absolutely. I always try and keep it nice and neutral on the page because I can't be dealing with all the stuff. So, you know, as you say, you're not going to please everyone, are you?
No,
And you
no,
can
but I don't
only
try anyway.
no, but
So
you can only say what you
yeah,
see and your opinion on why you've seen what
yeah,
you've seen and why it's come
yeah.
about. That's how it
Anyway,
is.
sorry, you had fun questions to wind
Yeah,
down because
gonna
I'm
rattle through some
conscious
fun questions. I'm keeping an eye on the
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Very fun questions. Favorite car you've ever driven
The
across any series?
14B, the Mansell 14B car. I didn't race it, but yeah, unquestionably.
Excellent. Very pleased you said that. Someone actually put one on there. What's the worst car you've driven? That's a great. That's a
I
better one.
raced an Austin A35 at the Goodwood Revival, I think, one year, and I've never been more terrified in my life. Literally, the thing felt it was going to roll. I think about 6 cars rolled in that race. And DC and I were in this thing together, and every time you turn the wheel, you just thought you were going to end up upside down. It was horrendous.
Really, you rolled.
Yeah.
Wow. Is there one you'd love to have a drive in? I mean, you've driven some fantastic cars. Is
Hmm.
there one that you think that one? If
Yeah,
they could
for
make
the I think the ones really missing from my bucket list are the Ferrari, the 1991 Prost Ferrari.
oh,
One of the most beautiful race cars of all time. I think.
gorgeous.
Sorry, the 1990 Ferrari, the Ferrari
Yes, sorry,
641, but it raced in 1990. Slightly confusing numbering. Um, and I
gorgeous.
think the McLaren MP44 or the MP46, the Honda McLarens.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. They're something else, aren't they? Those cars. Was there a series that? Oh no, sorry. Your favorite circuit? Obviously, you said you love Spa before the changes. Was there?
I think Le Mans, Monaco, probably my two equal favorites. Suzuka actually as well. I have to say those three.
Yeah. I think who was it said Suzuka was their favourite? I think it might have been Jackie X, actually. I'm sure it was Jackie X said Suzuka was his favourite, which is a great one. Craig Homer's just put a question up, which is going to tie in very nicely to my next one. I said, is there a series that you'd like to have had a go at? And he said, would you ever consider, would you like to have a go at IndyCar?
If I'm honest, I didn't fancy the ovals.
Yeah.
I saw a picture of Mike Conway's legs after he'd had a shunt,
Mm,
and that put me off off the ovals. If I'm
yes.
perfectly honest, I'm good friends with Dario and people like that, and see them limping around. I
Yeah.
didn't fancy the ovals, but I do wish I'd done more racing in America, though. I think
Yeah.
racing in IMSA and racing in sports car racing in America and doing Daytona stuff like that. I regret not having a chance to do more of that.
Yeah. think Daytona's definitely one. I just want to go back to something that Paul Ablett said. Sorry, he's just said good night. There was one more question I wanted to put to him, and for the life of me, I can't find it. Anyway, gonna scroll quickly on. Final question. Now this is a very, very difficult question. You've driven against a lot of, well, alongside with some amazing drafts. I just got a very quick list. You got, just going through chronologically from what I found online. You've raced against like Will Power, Robert Kubica, Simon Pagenaud, Jos Verstappen, Michael Ammermuller, Timo Glock, Bruno Senna, Mike Conway, David Brabham, Tom Christensen, Alan McNish, Mike Rockenfeller.
Rich, you're going to be here a while.
Yeah. Heidfeld, Brundle, Massa, Schumacher, Hamilton, Vettel, Alonso, Ricardo. I mean, so many people that you've raced against. Is there one that stands out?
No, you can't say that because different categories. I mean, I think unquestionably the driver that in all my years of junior Formula, there were two that stood out, probably had more than the others. One was Lewis. I only crossed paths with him over one weekend at Brands Hatch in 2003. He came to do a one-off race with Man and Motorsport, a British F3. I remember following him out the pits, and the car wasn't a great car, but the car control he had, it's the first time I thought to myself, yeah, I can't do what you do. I mean, you are sensational.
Yeah.
And I think the only other time was actually Nico Hulkenberg. We raced in GP2 together, and he was horrendously impressive in GP2. And why his F1 career never quite took off in the same way, I cannot understand, because he was F3 champion, A1 GP champion, GP2 champion. He was brilliant in junior Formula, and that never quite happened for him in F1. But I think those are the two drivers. Adam Carroll was the other one, I would say, in F3. Those are the three drivers that, I wouldn't use F1 as an example, because I think in F1 you're racing against your circumstances. You're racing against what team you're in and where you are in the pecking order. But in all the other categories, I think that's the three drivers that I thought, wow, you are something extraordinary.
Yeah, fantastic. Final thing, Paul Ablett, it was a BTCC question. He's quite right. Is there a team that you'd like to drive for? You mentioned Jason Plato going out. Obviously, he's at BTC Racing. Could you get in there?
Listen, these are all speculative, premature conversations.
Fine.
We'll see.
Yeah, see how we go. Fair enough. Karun, it's an hour and 20 minutes. It's been absolutely superb talking to you. Thoroughly enjoyable. Really appreciate your time talking about your career, your thoughts on motorsport and everything. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much.
Cheers, no problem.
Thank you to everyone who's tuned in as well. We're going to have another one in about 10 or 11 days' time. But yeah, Karun, thank you so much. Really do appreciate your time. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay. Good night, all.
Bye.